Well, welcome to the Dream Labs, Dr. Contrast Live. At long last, we're back on the air. My goodness, it's been quite a while here since we've really, actually been 3 weeks since we've had a chance to go live. And just very briefly, let me give you a bit of a background as to why that was taking place. Very interesting set of circumstances that's come up in the last few weeks. And I'm going to start this program today by offering a sincere, genuine thank you to probably a great wingman, a lot of confidence and respect in, and for his talent as well. And that's Shadow Man. That guy has just been an absolute genius all the way through. Yeah, just the sketches I'm starting to do here, Shadow, but I just want to take a moment to thank you for all the input over the course of time and in working back and forth with us. And then in a brief history here, about 3 weeks ago, we were notified that certain things were going to change in the office, and I was all fully prepared to go ahead and work with Michael and get situated with him in his new venture. And then all of a sudden, things changed about 3 or 4 days later after the announcement was made. And it looks like I was going to change offices and move out of this building and work with the Shadow Gang. I still am going to do that, but I was really surprised by the fact that what had taken place was the management came to me and stated, we don't want you to leave. So I thought, oh, that's great. Now what do I do? Well, just hold on. We'll get things worked out here, which they did. And it took about, that's why I've been silent for the last 3 sessions, 3 weeks, because I've not been able to really put it all together. And I packed all my goods in the first week when the announcement was made. I packed all my goods, put it in boxes, ready to go and work with Michael. Then things shifted. So everything's packed up, and I'm just going to go through some sketches here today on what I've been working on over the last few days on just some crossover stuff. And I'll bring up to speed on that one in a moment. But it was a really sudden change of events, and my heart sank a bit because I definitely do not want to disappoint the Shadow Man, because he's been an absolute genius and a great friend over the course of time. But we worked it out, and it might be in two places at once. Once he gets his place set up, we're going to do some joint venture work with some maybe Starship stuff. It's going to be really cool to do that with him. And also in the space I'm going to be here, I'm going to bring him over and do some guest appearances with him and walk through some things that he's doing. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Very fortunate, and believe me, folks, I am very grateful for the fact that we have individuals like Shadow in the system, other people who have been tuning over the course of time, all the followers on Twitch. Really appreciate it, and I'm hoping that you come back and we'll join forces again with some of the programs we're dealing with here. So stay tuned. It's going to be a lot of fun. I've got some good things going on in the next few weeks here. Now we're back live, and today, by the way, would be my last, probably my best. We would have just been, that was an awesome gesture they offered. Yeah, well, I hope so, Shadow, but it's going to be a gesture for both of us. I mean, we're going to join forces with this thing, and it's going to be really interesting how things begin to materialize. So, but I think it's really interesting too that before I begin again, it was just a unique set of circumstances, and what's going to allow me to do, I think, is open up. I've always wanted to go back and do a lot of workshop and seminar work, and now the space might be available to do that. I'm not sure how it's going to handle itself, but I know there's been a lot of requests for that, and also I'm still going to stay active on Twitch. But really miss being on the air for 3 weeks. You get a little rusty over a period of time. But in the meantime, when I was on the suspension of am I staying, am I going, am I packing the bags, leaving the bags, whatever took place, it's going to be really a phenomenal set of circumstances, because in that lag time, I was putting together some programming work and beginning to look at doing some additional website stuff, for example, and getting some really short, brief video work to get up into YouTube and get that through the website. Also, thank you again to Shadow. We've actually got a Shopify thing set up. We're going to start putting prints on there and hopefully shirts to come. So all these things are beginning to act. I know we've said this for months, and we've waited a long time, but then we finally just took action and said, listen, we've got to make this thing move. And thanks to his expertise, we got it worked out last week, and it's going to be fun to see what takes place there. So all that to say that I thought, interesting set of circumstances today, I think, for today's stream. Let me go back to a little bit of history first. When I was at design staff with General Motors, we had some advanced studios that were always working with certain package structures and certain layouts. And one of the layouts that we started really working with back in the late 80s, early 90s, that's a long time ago, isn't it? But it was a unique set of times, because there's a lot of interface going on with new packaging systems, new ways of componentry for like engine and placing and seating systems and IP systems. But what I thought was interesting, that we did a whole series on the advanced studios. We did a whole series on 3 platforms. The 3 platforms were the Firebird, Camaro, and Corvette. And what was interesting, all 3, Jordan came to us and said, look, we need to develop a crossover, an in-between vehicle between a wagon and a coupe or a sedan and an SUV. Let's call it a crossover, and that'd be kind of neat. So we did a series of experimental pieces with Camaro, Firebird, and Corvette. Corvette never really made it because it was such a brand identity icon piece. You couldn't touch that. It was almost like a political nightmare. And if you really destroyed the brand icon or the marketplace presence that Corvette had, you really were suspect in terms of destroying heritage through the window. But it did live, for example, in the Firebird and Camaro. We did a neat Firebird, went to the Paris Auto Show. It was a camback, so to speak. That was a variation between what a crossover now is called is a crossover. But the initial concept was really dealt with, we named it a, a camback. So we took the coupe and just added a little bit of a tail, a wagon section to the back of that thing. And the Firebird we did, and the Camaro we did, had a beautiful like butterfly glass doors on the rear side, right and left side, passenger driver side, that flipped up and open, and a glass tailgate. It was a really dramatic looking piece. So I can find some photographs of that thing in my files. I'll bring it back and let you see how that product worked out. It was a really kind of a different, daring departure, and the package size was great because it was just right. Shooting brake come from? Oh, the shooting brake is interesting because shooting brake, that was part of the process too. Shadow, thanks for bringing that up. We called it a camback, but also Jordan referred to call it as a shooting brake. That was a wagon. Well, there's a wagon, but the shooting brake terminology came from the 1700s and early 1800s in Europe and England, and all through the ability of France, England, Spain, etc. What they would do, all the nobles, for example, that had estates, especially in England, they determined a vehicle called the shooting brake. And what it was a wagon, a horse-drawn wagon, where all the guns, the shotguns, and all the pheasant hanging materials are put on this wagon, and they'd take these guests out to the hunting fields and they'd hunt. And that became the shooting brake. It was a vehicle. They'd go out there, go through the shooting process, load all the pheasants and all the hunting material back on the shooting brake, and then a horse-drawn carriage back to the estate or the castle where the origin was. So that's the root variation and meaning of shooting brake, and it's really cool. I still love the term. I mean, I've got I call my CTS. I've got a CTS wagon. Yeah, it's a fascinating story because they really did a lot of work with that. But all the nobles in Europe had a specific wagon, a tailored horse-drawn carriage where all the guests would load on, all the shotguns were loaded on, and all the pheasant material, all the overall hangers for the birds to be hung on, or out, take them out to the fields. They go through the hunting process and then bring them back in, and then have a big old festive dinner and so forth, and then treat themselves to a good old-fashioned time. But I'm always fascinated with the fact that shooting brake to me is, and by the way, if you have a moment, Shadow, take a look, and those of you who might be listening later on, take a look at Aston Martin's new shooting brake. It's absolutely beautiful. Now, I don't know if it's going to go in production, but it's an absolutely stunner. I mean, the one I'd seen unloaded was a jet black pearl, and just absolutely, yeah, you saw it was really cool, isn't it? I mean, a beautiful looking machine. So hopefully it's going to come back and reactivate itself. And I was going to kick out when I had my CTS service. I've got a CTS wagon. I always refer to it. Could you take my shooting brake in and have it repaired or do this or that? And it's really kind of funny because I said, what is that? What is that? Well, and I tell them the story. So it's a pretty interesting setup. So another question from Shadow. Never see product, which is, yeah, it's, I don't think it will be. I don't think, again, Aston Martin's got such a fine niche, Shadow, in that marketplace. If they go through a variation without really going through a lot of testing and programming, it could be a really difficult set of circumstances to work with. So here we go, gang. Well, what I've done is gone through, again, because all my stuff is packed up, these are just ballpoint pen sketches on just some variations on themes on some shooting brakes or crossovers. And so I started up some very loose little elevation, little pencil sketches here. Not really looking at a Mercedes benchmark here. I just kind of put the little 3-star program in there to give it a hope in some sort, and some character. But what I'm looking for, when I was going through this whole process, what I was really looking for was a combination, because you get a crossover now. There's almost too much tailoring in it. It's not chunky enough. It doesn't have a real gutty stance to it, and it's not sporty enough. I know it's kind of an odd misnomer to make a comment about a crossover, because it can't be too slick, it can't be too much of an exotic machine, but it should have a proportion change, and it doesn't have to be real chunky or muscular. I went through a whole variation of things here, and I'll walk you through some things and changing scale. And when it's all said and done today, what I'm looking forward to, hopefully, is getting some feedback from you all. I've got a whole series of variations on themes here. I went from this scale to 11 by 17. I just did some pencil studies on maybe variations. So at the end of the program, I'd like to open it up and say, okay, which one do you prefer? Then hopefully next week we'll do into a nice little rendering process and get that taken care of and go to a full illustration. But by that time, hopefully all my stuff will be unpacked and we'll have a studio operating next week downstairs. So there we are. There's the first set of sketches I did. These are real quick. Each one of these pages, for example, take about maybe 5 to 10 minutes just to kind of crank through some sketches. I'm going very quickly, looking at character, flavor, stance, proportion, geometry, all these things that we deal with in the design world. I'm putting together what ifs and see what happens with it. This one was kind of a clumsy. I started out with this very, very Teutonic, very geometric looking front quarter section, then went to a very organic tail section. And you know what? That does not work. It just looks clumsy enough. I put a little bit of slant to this, but the fear there is, here's the thing I've always tried to protect myself against. But really, I don't want to get into a situation from a conceptual point of view where it becomes predictable, or it looks like it's, oh, that looks like that could be this or it could be that. It's a better blend. You're right, Shadow. It's a better blend. Maybe this shape comes in and gets a lot more fluid and picks up some of the some tail graphics and reverses its sweep on it. It gives some of a blister to it. But it was a first pass at it. It just needs, it's too sheer. It's almost tank-like, which isn't bad. Or more functional, yeah. So it's neat. Then I went back and went from that point to a bit more typical elevation study here, then a front and rear 3/4, and it's tough too, because what's really tough about a crossover or shooting brake is, since it has a very distinctive niche, it should have a different character, front end graphic and rear graphic personality about it. Not that, and again, that's a pitfall too, because you can come back into the same old the alla Ferrari, they're hanging over the slant sides on it and so forth. It becomes very common and typical, which is another thing I battle with as well. I just don't like the unpredictability. I'd like to try and move things around a little bit, but still make it look like it's balanced. That one definitely does not. So let's move on here. So I'm moving to another page here and just gone through some really quick screamers. And I thought was interesting. But you know what? Yeah, a little more of a balance in this guy. It's not as austere, but kind of slopes it back a little bit, gives a little bit of a La Ferrari look to it, but why not? A little more fluid coupe variation up on top here. So as I go through this whole process, you'll see a lot of ups and downs, and sporty, not supportive, very severe, non-severe. So I'm looking for exploration to find a nice balance here to get things done. Then again, back to a very typical front end, little short wheelbase cross. But I thought was interesting though, I tried this package could be interesting. When I did that little sketch, I thought, you know, wouldn't it be really cool to go back into the late 30s or early 20s where they actually had vertical windscreens, but just put a little bit of forward slant to it and give it a whole new stance. That might be kind of spooky. Rolls-Royce did that years ago. I think it was a Gurney Nutting Coach, a concept piece done for royalty for Queen Elizabeth at that time in London. And it had just a little, there wasn't a vertical windscreen. It just had about a 5-degree tilt up front, but it had this big brow over the top, like the sun shield. Really cool. So I thought, you know what if we took that variation and really, that Coach design, that's right, Shadow, it was really cool. What if we took that variation and gave it a crossover look or an SUV look, or no, pardon me, but a shooting brake look in a more contemporary version? This one, as we go through this one's, I'm going to benchmark, I'm going to mark this one and put a placeholder in it. That could be an interesting concept to work with. Maybe that's too severe, but just a little bit of that forward lean just changes the entire paradigm here, and maybe a new look here to kind of notice everything kind of leans in this sketch, everything leans to the front and center. Pretty interesting approach to it. A little more muscular front end on it. So here's another pass of sketches. Let's move along here. Here's another pass. Get back to some really rapid ballpoint pen sketches. Now, pretty typical, body line, etc. Some classics here. Some pretty interesting surface work on some of these guys. But and again, very sporty looking shooting brake back in this little thumbnail right in here. Interesting. So and I'm really moving through these very quickly. I'm not spending a lot of time saying, oh, this is nice, this is not. I like that rear slanting A-pillar with this shirt. Yeah, that shirt or like a rear slanting A-pillar, short. Yeah. Short windscreen. Yeah, I mean, that could be interesting, wouldn't it? I mean, this is pulling the stretch a little bit again, really pulling the wheelbase out, or part of the stretch between the wheels and the body form a little longer. But again, it's going to give it some unique personality. Again, notice trying to lift the fact that instead of being so square, so blocky, and so predictable, getting a little more fluid in the tail graphics, and especially again back to this little study here. Pretty quick looking. Doesn't have quite yet the shooting brake look to it, but maybe a variation in theme. But I still want to go back. There's something about, I don't know what you think, Shadow. Let me get your vote on this one. Do you think this guy has some potential? I'll just wait for a response. I know you're quick to the gun here. To me, this one, when I did it, when I did this, I thought, yeah, it's a chance. But the more I looked at it, the more I thought, the way that windscreen's set up, it's always possible. That's true. So thank you very much. I'll definitely put up, let's do this to make sure I get that set up here. Put a little benchmark to this guy and say, that could be a possibility right there. That's an interesting format. Again, this whole stream today is about looking for a new set or new icon or a new paradigm, a new approach to thinking about crossovers or shooting breaks to give it a little more of an identity. So there we are. I've already seen that one. There's two. Now we go back into this page. We're going to discuss this one. Now I went back in, just slowing things down a bit now, getting a little bit more romantic with some of the shapes. All up Porsche, very front end looking. I mean, just thinking in terms of what functionality might be. Again, notice when you take that same form, this is more SUV type. It's got that high rocker sill to it, but the very vertical backlight on it. And I'm not really fascinated with that. I think there's a better way to treat that. Maybe it's not soft, or maybe it's a little more slope to it. Maybe it's reverse angle. I'm not sure, but we've got to go through that process, and that's why we're doing this thing today. I love the Cadillac strong lines and edges. Yeah, me too. The strength is, the boldness is good. I think it's got to have that kind of stiffness, but at the same time, proportion has to really activate with it. This was interesting. This little blister shape in the center of this thing. Again, a little bit of a drop back in the tail section, and a little more fluid in the front end. So let me move along here. And I don't want to spend a lot of time in these sketches because they're just really quick little what ifs. I mean, I spend about maybe per page about maybe 5 to 6 minutes per page just cranking through sketches. But how some brands like Lambo and Audi soften those edges. Yeah, that's right. That's the point, Shadow. You can go through a sheerness, but the way you radius it off or change the fade from thick to thin and vice versa makes a huge difference proportionally. So there we go. Another little study shot here. A little front three-quarter. This is kind of interesting where it kind of takes on a different character, almost like a passenger car, but it's got that little kickback here in the rear section that takes it away from being a very blunted form, so to speak. And you see it here in the elevation. It comes down, it kicks into the rear quarter, then goes into the tail section and into the return. Body graphics are pretty interesting. It has some potential as well, but we'll see how we move along here as we go. Then I switched gears, went to a middle of three-quarter. Front end on this thing, getting a little more rapid. And again, this is what I was getting at. This thing, earlier comment about this, the predictability, going back to icons or certain favorites, so to speak. And I'm not really a big fan of trying to work with the favorites, but I'm trying to change all the time and adjust certain things. But there are some graphics that just work well with certain things. And I went back to the very normal, almost fish mouth approach to this. A little difference in the lamping system, a little bit of an intake here. And again, a lot more of the roundness in the upper, almost like Audi's new Super Sphere, where they actually roll that thing back a little bit. Hi, one off for production, and then another bot. I don't know, thanks. So again, here they are, the front three-quarter, and again, the elevation. Notice, now we're starting to get a lot more slope in that front quarter, and then taking the windshield, really raking it back. I wonder sometimes, I might do a series of sketches by next week. I'll gird it. So, next go around, keep that same front end and then take that same roundness and pull that windscreen back. And almost like, thinking about this, interesting thing. There's a shadow message. Yeah, click the okay. Now, what I was going to bring up with this whole thing about this forward slant, one of my favorite machines over time, and I'll be doing a show on this program, on this vehicle, in the next couple of weeks. The Bentley Speed Blue Train Special, Speed 6. That thing, Super 8, just absolutely phenomenal piece of architecture. It also had that same almost vertical windshield, but I'm wondering if that whole high belt line, low upper, and extremely forward rake, just a slight touch in the windshield. I wonder what forms like this would look like if we bring them that very soft, the bustle back on it, and bring it forward and just put a little bit of reverse angle on it. That could be kind of a neat looking new look. So I'm going to give that a try as well. What do you think, Shadow? This got some potential to it from an elevation study. I mean, I'm not too enamored with the three-quarters. This is kind of a neat little skirt system here to work with. But I think this could have some potential as well graphically. It's got the right stance. It's got the right full back on the windscreen. But again, I want to try that Blue Train Special. The skirt is a keeper. Yeah, that's kind of neat. Yeah, this is cool. I agree with you. There it is. So let's notice, go through these a little bit. A lot here to cover. Again, back to again some pretty random. Now it's getting a little bolder with some of the things now. Trying to lift the rocker, maybe dipping the hood. Yeah, but again, notice a little bit of a secondary bridge here at the cowl area here, around the windshield, around the A-pillar line. Could be very interesting. Love the front view. Yeah, that's got some things to it. If I can get the thing straightened out a little bit, it would be great. That was so quick. I actually put it about maybe it's into a very lowly in the corner. So, but I think the front end graphics here is interesting too. Now we're starting to explore some things that are beginning to make a difference in this whole look for a new benchmark, a new packaging approach, which is a crossover or in what I refer to as a shooting brake. Now the next one. Now we really get bold. Starting to change the whole paradigm, getting a lot of lift in the rocker panels, lifting the body line. Notice the center line wheel almost breaks up the rocker section, but it gives it a whole new element in terms of weight, proportion, etc. Interesting thing. And again, there's some neat stuff going on here. For example, this is a proportional change. That's kind of an interesting stance. Everything comes and hugs around the front wheels. Yeah, that's wild. And that could be a lot of fun, I think. Notice how I'm moving from very, very static, a little bit more of a chance, a little more risk, changing some of the proportion a little bit, and it's still getting back up. Let's see, it would be cool if I could change its height like the Porsche. Yeah, it just drops, and maybe reduce some of the overhang on the wheels, but kind of get that thing to lower itself. Remember the old Citroen? That was a neat deal too, with I think it was just fluid suspension that would actually change the road height. So again, we're getting a little bolder with this stuff. Let's go to the next one. And again, some front end graphics. And what does it look like from the front 3/4? We're doing something a little more severe. Do we want to take that chance? The sides fold up behind the wheel. Yeah, that'd be cool. But again, notice the front end graphics here. Now I'm getting a little bit more adventuresome, getting away from some of the typical paradigms of front grille, little texture change, all of this, all of that. Moving away from some of the familiar, just real fast sketches, exploratory stuff. They're all, I think, and I'll say this for what it's worth, and I hope I'm not offending anybody if you view this, Shadow, or other individual who might look at this program later. I just don't fall in love with the typical. I mean, yeah, there are things you come back to that maybe some favorites, but I really fight hard from sketch to sketch to be extremely quick in the study, because the quicker you move, the less you are to go back to favorites and you fall back to habits. So I think I've always been trained by guys like me, Legacy, Jordan, and the people I work with. If you go through an experience, just burst into it, go very quickly with it, let it take its natural course, but don't try to predict it or change it. See what it leads to. That's where the newness, I think, comes in. It refreshes itself. There's another little variation on theme here. Now I'm getting a little less front endy and more sheer, and getting some. But the proportion change looks pretty good. Notice a very wide stance, very low upper, high belt line. Not so much here, but I think this one's got some character to it. Be interesting as well. So let's go back here. Now back again to some of these studies. Elevation study, bring that slope in, bring it back around again, from upper to the body crease, and then back into the lower area again. This is an interesting little gesture here, I think. This little cantilever, this brow with an umbrella over the rear quarter could be interesting design theme as well, along with that same skirting system here, and a little different of a front end approach too. So there's a lot of stuff here, a lot of material that I'm working with that I'm still not quite really, I'm not settled in on that front view. This one, you like that? Pretty interesting. But again, very sheer, but at the same time, very animal-like and very aggressive. Which again could play into some, again, that could be a very strong, bold statement in terms of looking for this new paradigm. What's the new architecture going to be? It's like front kind of, yeah. It's likely electric. The front can't have a very low. Yeah, it can. You can drop that right down. You can almost go to GTP. Drop it right in over the wheel house fairings, and really drop that belt line or the hood line and bring it up in the upper. So there we go. That's that guy there. Now some little marker studies here. Some elevation front ends. Again, going back to a more traditional look. I'm not really pleased here with this guy. Cameras even reverse. Yeah, like in the G12. That's a great feature too. So I'm taking all these notes as we go, Shadow, and we're going to bring this all together into some really drop-dead stuff for the actual final presentation piece on this advanced studies on these shooting brakes and crossovers. So again, little thumbnail sketches, front end and the rear 3/4. Let's go back to this guy. Another little aggressive-looking front end when we actually take a little more of a different stance. Front ends that notice what I thought about this guy was what was unique to me was the proportion change, the width, the height, and the blockiness of the body forms, and then adding some of the skirt elements across to that. So it's not really captivating it here, but I'm getting it here, I think, as far as a new look, interesting approach to it. So let's go back to another one here. Again, front end study is uninteresting. Again, that wrap over bonnet, that shroud look over the rear 3/4 could be interesting as well. So I'm looking at some neat stuff there. from that point of view. So it's just been really very unique in terms of an exercise. And I've always felt too that one of the most difficult things to pull correctly from an aesthetic proportional automobile design process is an SUV or a crossover, because it's a wholly different set of circumstances: ride height, belt lines, widths, proportion, detailing. It all changes. It's not like doing a GTT or an exotic machine or something of a niche a la Porsche, Ferrari, or Maserati. It's a different mindset altogether, but there's nothing that prevents you from giving that same personality into that package if it works well. So that's what I'm looking for in today's stream, some input. So that's the end of the 8.5 by 11. So let's kind of switch gears a little bit. Let me get these organized here. So that was the first family of sketches I went with, so to speak. I got those guys down. Then I went full cycle. Yeah, some little color studies here. You know, let's move the scale up a little bit here. See if we can get kind of really romantic with this thing. So what do you think, Shadow? There's phase one. Any input there? What do you think? Again, very sporty looking, very fluid looking. This was a kind of an interesting approach, almost like a mini a full power rear mid-engine. I don't like the proportion here, that location. If I did this again, I'd probably pull that fake input a little bit more closer to the front and change the character to kind of pick up the wheel blister. But I just thought I'd switch gears and go a little bit more different scale at 11 by 17 studies here, and begin to put it all together. So that's first pass at it. Again, just staying in elevation, because I think, let me refer to that for just a moment. When you work in elevation, what I've been taught to do over the course of my career is to take an elevation and give it almost a three-dimensional appearance to it, so it's almost in perspective. That's why you see the far side wheels, but at the same time, the way you detail the surfaces can give it a presence of being in perspective. So, but it's also interesting, if you get the proportion right in an elevation, or a good soldier study, which these are, then you can kind of transfer that into a 3/4 front, 3/4 rear. You've got a good guidepost to work with. So there we are. That's the first pass at it, 11 by 17. So I went that route. Then we moved over to this guy and did the same set of family, a little bit more architectural looking, really pulling the rear wheels a little further rearward and putting the backlight forward, and a lot more fluid in the actual windscreen itself. And then the same below, just trying to keep that same texture. A very short wheelbase. This would be almost SWIBs, short wheelbase systems to work with here. So once I got through that pass, I said, okay, now it's time to kind of all this stuff, all these information, all these little thumbnail sketches, and put it into some sort of context. So first thing I did was these are just pencil studies. And the last few that I'm going to work with here, I want to describe to you. These are potential what ifs from this crossover family. And I kept it strictly in pencil for two reasons. Number one, all my materials were packed. Couldn't get the markers to do any color work or pastels. But so I thought, okay, let's just do a series of line studies from all this generation of sketches, and maybe pick a family of forms or one or two winners and begin to do an illustration to get it all done. So this is the first one. It was much more aggressive. Still has that same low. Notice how the upper really interesting, because strong A-pillar, and it fades as it goes river, and that and elevation it would drop off. So it has some of the same character we established in some of the earlier sketches I showed you here today. Then I'm going to put a little interior study together. I don't think it's quite as dramatic as it should be. And when I went through this thing, I thought, you know what, it's a passable form. It's an interesting statement, but let's see if we can get a little bolder with this thing. So let's go back, and so I started here, and then I went into this. I thought, what if we got a little bit more guttural with this thing, and really started to look at a bolder front end. Again, notice almost the same character, same fender line, so to speak. I picked up some of the same characteristics. I can get them together here one by one. A little bit here. Let's move this down just a bit, see if we can get these together side by side. Notice almost a little bit of the same character with the front 3/4 coming off of the front wheel fender flare coming off of that. And then maybe, but I just changed the whole front end. I mean, this could be kind of an interesting study here in terms of this whole front end could go like a body color of some sort, and the sponsor, the spoon underneath have a body color as well. So, and then again, what I thought was interesting from this interior here, no, it's pretty typical. Had the big floating screen, then it dropped off into a tray behind all this, and it was just a typical what we're doing now, so to speak, with an IP system and a tunnel console and steering wheel, all of Formula One. So, but I thought, why don't we try something where we actually take this same, and the steering wheel might be underneath there and just kind of comes out a la Audi, where it just comes out and begins to service itself. But this is much more of a digital plate, and I'm going to go back in and throw some section lines in here. And as you begin to hit the ignition, for example, these plates can come forward and move and give you information as you go through the process. But I thought this was a little fresher looking intake areas or AC systems. Tunnel also tying into a disk area. This could kind of rotate back and forth. That could move. So I'm trying to put through some bits and pieces that will make a lot of sense for execution in this new look here. I thought this was a little more aggressive in terms of that front end graphics, a little bolder, a little heavier looking. This one, you think this one's kind of neat? Yeah, yeah. This one could be interesting. We actually dish that whole thing in front here. And again, Shadow, we're going to add some section lines in here to kind of break that form up, and then maybe I'll do a little thin vignette too to show you where the instrumentation will actually move and articulate. I might put a little more beef in the lower area because the idea here was to get that steering device to come up underneath Audi, that almost the same concept, and really pull that together. So I think this had a lot of impact to it. I think the front end graphics too. It's a little bit different, but I think it's got. And I could see this, for example. Follow with me. I could see this whole pocket there being like a deep metallic orange and into a body silver and a black inface and intakes. So it gives us a chance to do some really neat. Yeah, the body side. Yeah, the sides are cool too. I think that's neat. This one gives us a chance to get a little bit more bolus with color graphics and texture change, whereas this one, where I started with, is a little more typical. Its body form is there. It's almost Mazda-like, and it's okay, but it doesn't have the same zip that we're looking for here. And secondly, before I move on here, that's the rationale for going through a lot of sketches. Those first 16 8.5x11s were just what ifs. And we begin to build on. Here's some things I like. Here's the things we can work with. Here are things we can really kind of move with, and make some changes to it. So. Interesting. I thought this one had some real character to it. I think broke it. I would love to try this one too. But this, I'd love to try this guy, holding everything constant, keeping that the same, but coming back in there and imagine this, that same slope, and then taking that whole windshield, reversing it, and putting it almost like that Bentley, the Blue Train Special, just a little bit of forward lean on the windshield. See what it looked like. And at the same time, keep all this where it is, but right in through here, go back to the big old huge gauges, for example, speedo, tacho, and a couple of oil pressure. That would really be cool. Interesting how that can go back, almost like a retrofit. Very contemporary, but a little bit of the old Bentley history up there in the IP system itself. So this could be all wood grain. That could be kind of cool. Anyway, there we are. Now I went back to this one. Here would be the rear 3/4 of this guy. So there's the front study. Here's the rear 3/4. Let me move this in place here. There's the rear 3/4. Just kind of a little bit of a different, very clean, simple rear section to it. The backlight is here, rear view mirror. The lighting system is up on top, but a very plain rear deck. And again, the same texture up on front here. But this one, and again, the texture here, there's the elevation. A little chunkier, a little bit more, pretty interesting how it all comes together here. So I thought that was a pretty interesting balance in terms of what we've got from the studies thus presented today. So that was one. Then I thought, one more passer, maybe a couple more variations on theme. Let me go back to this guy here. Let's go back here and get this guy set up. There it is there, sorry. And the last plate, going back to some, again, a little bit more muscular. Maybe it's, this one I could see being almost like a short wheelbase, like a SWIB shooting brake, where you actually take the whole package and shrink it down a little bit and go a little taller with it, give it some real meat. But again, higher belt line, a little more forceful here, and a little bit more of a different front end. We've got a lot of plan view change, and it actually juts out and it comes back into the lamping system. And the lighting system's up on top. This is all intake. And then again, the canards down below and some of the stabilizers. Body side, put a little bit of texture in here, maybe a body color change as well. So again, this was an interesting, and again, same with this one down below, a little bit more typical, forward lane, and then pulling the intake surface back a little bit, and then the lighting's up on top. There was everything within me to kind of resist what was going on out there in terms of the one brands or the packaging we see already. There's some neat things going on out there, but I think the whole marketplace is moving toward this very, very almost in-between process of shooting brake and still almost like a very profound or an elegant-looking sedan. So there's a little bit of variation change in there that I think I was trying to capture in putting these sketches together. So that does it for the actual run of the sketches. I will go back and reverse this again. Rear 3/4. This is the one I thought that really had the character to it. I'm in your camp, Shadow. I think this has got some real character, some personality to it. It meets all the pieces we're looking for. Shooting, braking, character. Has a nice proportional chunkiness to it. It's got some interesting texture changes to it. Front end graphics is unique, at least in my opinion. I don't know how you feel about it, but that's how I feel. about it as well. This one's where we started, and I'm not really quite sure. It's pretty common, still an interesting form proportionally, but it didn't have that freshness about it, that same spark. Whereas this one, again, I hate to be redundant, but I think this guy, I'm going to try a variation on this one, where we actually pull that A-pillar, reverse it, a la Bentley, a Blue Train Special. That could be fun to see. Anyway, let's go back with that. And then the rest of these guys, if you saw this or not, these are the two that I switched gears on. I'm going to do a little bit of color study here. Same proportion, a little shorter wheelbase and a little bit more of a proportional change, but there it was. And then again, this one, more venturesome here in terms of boldness, in terms of being very sporty looking, very, very compact, and again, a very aggressive downhill look to it, especially the one down below. Again, as I said earlier, not really pleased with this intake, this faux intake piece. I'd pull that a little bit further forward, maybe go a little rounder with it, and then just pull it off that fender form and bring it into it, so it integrates itself a little bit better. So then, obviously, these are the sketches we started with, and I think that concludes the whole process of what we're looking for in this whole crossover package, or shooting brake, so to speak. Let me put that all together here for a moment. But I think it's been a good exercise, number one, to go through a little bit of a variation in proportion and change of venue here from coupe sedans and sporty cars and exotic machines into something that's a little more practical. It's some very bold thing. Yeah, thank you. I think it's interesting. We're taking some chances here, Shadow. And as I said, I think based on the consensus from your input here, I'll take that one shooting brake studies near the end there and begin to put a little bit of color to it. If we can unpack my stuff for next week, that'll be the program. Phase 2, we're going to do a little color study on this this shooting brake series and kind of wrap it up. But here's what I think is going to be really cool. After that, Shadow, since you're here, I'd like to get with you sometime next week, hopefully, or even this week if it's possible, to go through some things about what we want to do for the Equinox show. That's going to be really fun on June 3rd. I'm excited about that one. That's going to be a lot of fun. I want to do some really drop dead stuff, aircraft design or something that you want to work with. That'd be great to look at there. So I'm hoping that we can get some feedback from the gang. I've got some of my stuff moved in downstairs. Some obviously left here. And while you're on the air here, Shadow, I dropped you a message earlier. Is it possible maybe to kind of get this stuff moved up, all the lighting, camera, etc., sometime tomorrow if you're in? If not, I can fully understand. Or maybe move it next week, whatever. I'd like to be I'd like to get all the stuff moved out of here and ready to fly next Wednesday when we kind of pick up phase 2 in this program. So it's been a really interesting last month, and it really feels great to be back on the air. I missed 3 weeks because of the scheduling changes here, and no disrespect to anybody. It should be interesting and putting it all together. So I'm really looking forward. I've got some programming all lined up for the next few weeks, and so in the interim of being quiet, I was putting together some processing here. And also, I'm going to be doing some interesting things too with my website. I'm going to start, now that we're all set, talk to Shadow about this. We've got some things to add into the website, the apparel and the like. But I'm also going to start doing some really short 10 to 15 minute clips and get it up on YouTube too for hopefully some purchase or sale. So nonetheless, gang, it's been really exciting. It's good to be back on board. So thank you very much, Shadow, for taking the time with me today. It's always good to have you on board. And once again, I started the program complimenting you for your absolute incredible assistance and all the help you've been to me over the course of the last year and a half or two. It's going to carry on. I'm really looking forward to working with you on your new site, and we'll work back and forth here from my end of it and your end of it, and put some joint pieces together and just create some programs for like maybe some Starship stuff to go live with your outfit, and then over on this end from our end as well. So we've got some pretty good ideas of what I want to do with it, and I'm sure you do as well. So to all of you, thank you so much for your patience. It's been great to go back on board today. Looking forward to next week. We'll be in a new office. We'll be able to kind of open it up, and I told Shadow, I kind of feel like I'm going to be a great big huge canyon area all by myself, but we'll see what happens with it, and I'm going to go stir crazy. I'll be good. Onward and upward is right, Shadow. And if you're coming in tonight, I'll just leave the door open, and I don't know if we can get in to work with it, or maybe tomorrow if you're in, I can help you move some of this stuff if you don't mind. So once again, gang, all the best to you. Please take a look at my website, drcontrast.com. If you have any notes you want to pass along to me, please feel free to do so at jim@drcontrast.com. I'd be happy to respond. Anything you might want me to work on to help you with, or go through some lesson planning. And on that note, too, in the downtime over the last 3 weeks, I have gone back in and looked at some things from the point of view of instructional materials. I'm going to go back in and do some more in-depth instructional stuff on, because I'm getting a lot of questions and commentary from people in the area here about how to build certain compound shapes. what proportion looks like, how to develop form, what forms do, how to develop integration systems. I'm going to go back and do some lesson planning on that stuff too. So I'll be mixing it up quite a bit. I want to go back into architecture. I've got a great landscape program I'm going to put on for the next few weeks. You'll love it. It's a whole new process of getting into signage materials and building systems, architecture as well, product design. So it's going to be fun. And again, so grateful for the audience, so grateful that you've tuned in. And to you, Shadow, big salute, man. Unbelievable, great talent that you are. Thank you so much. And again, please feel free to join me at, look at my website, jim@drcontrast.com. And again, notes, that'd be my email rather, and pardon me, the website, drcontrast.com, and my email address, jim@drcontrast.com. Look forward to hearing from you, and I will sign off by saying this, and it's been a while since I've said it, but I mean it with all my heart. Always never forget to remember to dare to be great, because you are. All the best, gang. Thank you. We'll see you in a week's time. Take care.